Imagine a place where stone remembers screams, where darkness doesn't just hide, it clenches like a jaw. The entrance disappears behind you into the blackness, and in front of you, the passages branch out, each leading not to an exit, but further, deeper. This is not a metaphor and not a dream. This is a labyrinth. That is how ancient sources describe it. A labyrinth beneath the palace of Knossos in Crete, where, according to legend, a creature was held. One that was both man and bull. The Minotaur, a name that scorches the imagination. But before picturing horns and a predatory roar, we should go back to the beginning. The king of Crete, Minos, sought confirmation of his authority and turned to Poseidon, god of the seas. Poseidon sent him a snow-white bull as a sign of divine favor. Minos was supposed to sacrifice it, but he couldn't. The animal was too majestic. The king kept it for himself, breaking the agreement. In response, the god sent a curse, not directly on him, but on his wife, Pasiphae, who, according to myth, felt an uncontrollable desire for that very bull. With the help of a mechanism created by the master Daedalus, she united with it. The result was the Minotaur, a being that cannot be explained by natural means. A human body, the head of a bull, superhuman strength, animal instincts. His appearance was not just grotesque, it was an insult to the natural order. This creature could not be integrated into society. It could not be destroyed immediately. And most importantly, it could not be left without control. That is when Daedalus, an inventor and architect renowned across Hellas, created a labyrinth for him. Not just a prison, but an architectural phenomenon. A structure so complex that even its creator could lose his way inside. The labyrinth had two purposes: to hide the creature and to keep it from escaping. But why was there a need to contain it in the first place? The Greek myth gives an answer: fear. They feared the Minotaur. To appease the beast, or, according to other versions, on Minos' demand, Athens had to send 14 young people to Crete, every year, or every 9 years. 7 boys and 7 girls. All of them vanished in the labyrinth. There was no return, and each time the legend focuses not on the deaths of the victims, but on the one who waited for them inside. This is what sets the Minotaur apart from other mythological creatures. The Greeks knew plenty of monsters: chimeras, hydras, gorgons, but they were always elsewhere, in distant lands, in the underworld, at the edge of the world. The Minotaur, though, he was inside, at the heart of the island, underground, beneath the feet of the king. Too close, too real. There's something unsettling about this myth. It's too specific. It has geography, Crete, named characters, Minos, Pasiphae, Daedalus. A physical structure, the labyrinth, victims from Athens. There are no abstract fields or magical kingdoms. Everything is tied to real places. And this alone makes one wonder, what if the foundation of this legend is not fantasy, but something more substantial? Ancient civilizations had one universal tool: to transform the incomprehensible into myth. When confronted with something that doesn't fit their worldview, it's easier to cloak it in gods or curses. But what if the story of the Minotaur isn't a tale of royal immorality or divine wrath, but an encrypted memory of the arrival of something the Greeks simply couldn't explain? Some will say, fiction. But why then are there so many elements in this story that, even from today's perspective, seem not fantastical, but disturbingly realistic? Why wasn't the creature killed, but instead contained? Why were regular sacrifices needed? And why did it look like a hybrid of 2 biological species? Questions to which the legend gives answers that are far too simple. Perhaps that's why it survived until today, because it never offered a final explanation, because it left behind more than just a plot. The story of the Minotaur is no longer a fairy tale. It is a trace, and every trace leads somewhere deeper. The legend tells us what the Minotaur looked like, the body of a man, the head of a bull. But this description is so vague that it raises more questions than it answers. We don't know what exactly he was, a 2-meter giant or a stocky, short creature. Was his body human or muscular and beastly? Did he have a tail? Hooves? Did he move on 2 legs like a man or leap like an animal when chasing his victims in the dark? But if we imagine that the Minotaur existed physically as a real creature, then we must turn to logic and biology. A bull's head is a massive structure that requires appropriate neck and spine musculature. If the body was human, could such a creature even maintain balance? Wouldn't that require redistribution of weight, reinforced bones, a shifted center of gravity? This kind of anatomy already suggests either it was a very specific breed of beings or an artificially created hybrid with carefully calculated proportions. His eyes, according to descriptions, were dark, shiny like scorched coal. They didn't glow, they absorbed light. Some sources hint that the Minotaur had excellent night vision. Otherwise, how would he hunt in a labyrinth with no exit? His home, a place where sunlight never reached, only the faint flickering flame of torches brought by naive victims. But what's even more curious? He never escaped. In no version did the Minotaur try to flee. This creature may not have even known that another world existed beyond his stone confines. Imagine to grow up, live, and die in a never-ending trap of narrow corridors. Was he truly a predator or a victim, doomed to the slow decay of consciousness? His behavior is known only through the aftermath, the disappearance of victims. But no myth describes how exactly the Minotaur killed. No legends about his attacks have survived, only about the fear he caused. As if in the very nature of his existence there was something that crushed the will. Perhaps he didn't even kill. Perhaps the boys and girls perished, lost in the darkness, while the Minotaur simply watched in silence. A being that never asked to be born, never chose its form, and never begged for blood. People love clear images, black or white, good or evil. But in the Minotaur's story, there's too much gray. If he wasn't a beast in the traditional sense, then what was he? Did he have speech? Did he understand what was happening? Perhaps there was something like a mind inside him. Primitive, instinctive, or on the contrary, deep but twisted by solitude. If isolation can destroy the human psyche in a matter of weeks, what could have happened to a creature locked away for years? There were hypotheses that the Minotaur might not have been alone, that other beings existed, perhaps not as strong, but with similar traits. Ones kept in isolation out of fear, misunderstanding, or inconvenient truth. Ancient texts mention strange hybrid creatures, half human, half cat, dogs with human hands, women with horse heads. Are these artistic images, hallucinations, or remnants of memories of real biological experiments? In the world of cryptozoology, there is the concept of an anomalous hybrid, a creature with no known biological origin, yet one that persists in the folklore of many cultures. And the Minotaur fits this category disturbingly well. He is neither demon nor god. He is flesh, and the more we try to reduce him to a symbol, the more he slips through our fingers, as if he wants to remain something more than just a myth. Perhaps that is why he was locked away, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Not because he was evil, but because he had no place among us. In the silence of the labyrinth, his breathing might still echo, slow, steady, not like a monster's, but like someone who is waiting. If we accept that the Minotaur could have existed not just as a mythological image, but as a real being, the main question arises: how could such a thing come to be? In the legend, it is the result of a curse, divine punishment embodied in physical horror. But what if that version was invented simply to hide the truth? The fusion of man and beast, is one of the oldest themes in world mythology. The Egyptian Anubis with the head of a jackal, Thoth with the head of an ibis, the Greek Pan with goat legs and horns, the Sumerian Enkidu, a wild man created by the gods. These images are not just fantasies, they are echoes of hybridization, spoken of thousands of years ago. Could ancient civilizations have preserved memories of beings created artificially? The Greeks described the Minotaur as the product of sin to justify its existence through morality. But the body does not obey morality. If the Minotaur truly had a stable anatomy, strength, reflexes, it could not have been the result of a random mutation. The very idea that a bull and a human could produce offspring contradicts evolutionary logic. So either we're dealing with pure fiction or with something else. Interference with genetics, which our ancestors could only describe as the wrath of the gods. It could have been a deliberate creation, a being combining strength, endurance, and intellect. But for what purpose? As a guard, a research subject, a mistake? Perhaps a hybrid of this type was part of a larger project, or even a cultic structure, where such beings were used as tools of fear or control. In Sumerian texts, the Scorpion Man is mentioned, a being guarding entrances to other worlds. In Hindu scriptures, there are Rakshasas, powerful hybrids created for battle. In Slavic legends, we also find creatures with human torsos and animal heads. Coincidence? Or is it possible that long ago, experiments in creating beings were not the exception, but part of knowledge that was lost or hidden? If we believe this hypothesis, then the Minotaur was not born of sin, but created by design, by precise principle. Its physiology, the result of engineering, not accident. The legend of Pasiphae and the bull, merely an allegory, an attempt to give a simple explanation to a complex phenomenon. Because imagining someone altering DNA in ancient times is scarier than believing in a curse. Another version, the Minotaur is punishment, but not divine, human. It could have been created as a form of sentence, as the deformation of a person for guilt. It sounds like dark science fiction, but in ancient societies, mutilation and exile were common punishments. And what if there was a culture where punishment meant modifying the body, not to kill, but to isolate? The Minotaur didn't escape, perhaps not because it couldn't, but because it was no longer what it once was. Its consciousness could have retained fragments of memory, remnants of a past it no longer understood. And then the labyrinth is not just a prison, but a containment chamber for the result of failure. Human pride, technology, or ritual went too far, and the Minotaur became a reminder of how far one can go. It's life, not a function, but a consequence. This would explain why it was alone, why it never came outside. Because it was not a demon, not a freak, not a monster. It was a result. One of those who are not spoken of aloud, but remembered in legend. What if this story is the first entry in humanity's encrypted archive of biological memory? A tale of how we once tried to alter the body and lost the soul. When it comes to the Minotaur, we usually limit ourselves to the territory of Crete. But Greek sources do not state that the creature was born there. It ended up in the labyrinth, yes, but who said it was created there? What if the island was not the place of origin, but merely a place of containment? Plato, when describing Atlantis, emphasized its technological superiority. A city with rings of canals, complex infrastructure, and military power that impressed even the Hellenes. According to the dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Atlantis perished in a single day and night, as if someone turned off the lights. Geographically, it is most often sought in the Atlantic Ocean, but more and more theories relocate it to the Mediterranean Sea. Santorini, Malta, even parts of Crete, possible remnants of a lost civilization. And here begins the most interesting part. What if Crete doesn't just appear in the Minotaur legend by coincidence? What if it is a leftover structure that survived the catastrophe? A stronghold or colony of Atlantis that hadn't been destroyed? And the labyrinth, built by Daedalus, not just an architectural marvel, but a reconstruction of an older containment technology. The architecture of the Palace of Knossos amazes even modern researchers. A complex system of plumbing, ventilation, multi-level planning. All this seems far too advanced for its time. Combined with the legend of the labyrinth, it raises questions. Perhaps the myth arose precisely because the structure sparked curiosity, even thousands of years ago. And here it's fitting to draw a parallel. Even in the 20th century, humanity repeatedly returned to the idea of creating hybrids. Nazi scientists, especially within the SS and the Ahnenerbe organization, conducted horrific experiments. Among them were attempts to cross humans with apes, research into pure blood, and the creation of the ideal soldier. Lacking moral boundaries, they sought to unlock the mechanisms of genetics that could change nature itself. And if in the 20th century humanity was willing to attempt this, might not similar experiments have already taken place long before? This is not just an attempt to shock. This is a historical rhythm. Humanity constantly reaches for the limits of what is permitted, to understand, to control, to use. The Minotaur may not have been an anomaly, but an attempt. The result of an experiment that remained beyond the comprehension of later generations. It was hidden, sealed, passed on as a myth, not to prevent the mistake from being repeated, but maybe to ensure it wouldn't be stopped again. Daedalus, according to the legend, didn't just create the labyrinth, but also built the device that allowed Pasiphae to unite with the bull. In Greek tradition, this seems absurd, but in context, it is testimony to lost knowledge, a mechanism for artificial insemination, no matter how wild that sounds. It's not mentioned in a medieval manuscript, but in a legend from 3,000 years ago. When we hear the word Atlantis, we imagine something utopian. But what if it was not an ideal civilization, but simply a very ancient one? And it had the same traits as we do: curiosity, cruelty, fear, and a thirst for experimentation. If so, then the Minotaur is no accident. He is evidence, one of those who did not burn with the city, but remained where the world had not yet forgotten him. Crete, Santorini, ruins hidden beneath ash and sea. We look at the remnants and see stone. But perhaps they remember not only earthquakes, but also beings the world no longer dares to recall without the mask of myth. At the heart of the Minotaur legend lies one of its most chilling elements: the regular sacrifices. 7 boys and 7 girls, sent from Athens to Crete, vanished in the labyrinths with no chance of return. This wasn't a one-time act of revenge. It was a system, a ritual. And if we look at it not as a fairy tale, but as a fragment of a real event, the main question arises: why? One might assume that these people were sacrificed to feed the creature, but that explanation raises doubts. Were that many victims truly necessary? Why exactly 14? Why specifically boys and girls? This wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. As if the creature didn't just have an appetite, but a cyclical need, tied to phases, moods, or even physiology. Perhaps the Minotaur had episodes of aggression that couldn't be contained. If the being, created or raised in isolation, had stimulation thresholds that built up, then the victims weren't offerings of religion, but a containment mechanism. Instead of destroying it, they calmed it with blood. In this light, the legend of Theseus takes on a different tone. According to the myth, he willingly entered the labyrinth, killed the Minotaur, and escaped thanks to Ariadne's thread. But from a logical perspective, how could a young man defeat a creature that had killed so many for years? Why Theseus? And was he truly a hero? Or perhaps a specially prepared eliminator, sent to finish what others couldn't? Perhaps Crete could no longer contain the creature. Perhaps it was slipping out of control. And Theseus wasn't coincidentally the son of Athens' king. His mission may have been political, military, or ecological, to neutralize a threat that could no longer be held. And that's why the story was wrapped in a heroic tale, as is often done when reality is inconvenient to repeat. But was the Minotaur truly killed? The myth offers no clear proof. There's no evidence that the creature's body was shown, buried, or destroyed. No details that confirm its death. Only this: after Theseus, the sacrifices stopped. What if the creature was simply moved, hidden deeper, the knowledge about it frozen? History remembers times when problems weren't solved, just isolated. Radioactive materials buried in concrete, the sick placed on distant islands. Why not do the same with something that had gone beyond control? In that case, the labyrinth isn't an archetypal symbol of self-discovery, as mythologists love to say. It's a functional structure of containment, a real space designed to hold a biological threat. It's complexity, not art, but a barrier, a system where everyone could get lost, except the one who must never leave. The fact that no one ever came out of the labyrinth alive except Theseus is no accident. He isn't a hero, he's an exception, and the creature he defeated may still be watching from the depths of time, lost somewhere between stone and legend. We're used to fearing monsters that attack from the outside, but the most dangerous are the ones we create and lock away ourselves. Because sooner or later, if not them, then the memory of them breaks through to the surface. The Minotaur is not just one of many legends. His image doesn't fade over time like hundreds of other mythical creatures. He clings to culture, to literature, to dreams. He is uncomfortable, physical. He cannot be transformed into a mere allegory because he is far too specific. And that alone should make us ask, why has this image stayed with us? Across different corners of the world, there are accounts of beings resembling the Minotaur. In India, Turkey, Africa, the Caucasus, stories of half-humans with the heads of bulls, goats, or dogs. In some isolated mountain communities, taboos still exist against mentioning the Horned Ones, beings said to have been made not by the gods, but by men. Archaeologists occasionally uncover bones with anomalous proportions, skulls with protrusions, unnaturally thickened jaws, hybrid bone structures. These findings are usually quietly recorded as mutations or skeletal anomalies. But what if it's not coincidence? What if we are seeing remnants not of nature's mistakes, but of its interference? If we accept that Atlantis or similar civilizations once existed, and the Minotaur was the product not of a curse, but an experiment, then the story takes on a terrifying logic. Ancient peoples may have reached such a level of development that they no longer just built or conquered. They created beings, spliced genes, tried to engineer a new form of life. They sought power, control, immortality, but they forgot the most important thing. You can change the body, but the spirit is unpredictable. Maybe that was the beginning of the end. The Minotaur was just the tip of the iceberg. The real story is the silence after the catastrophe, the flood, the eruption, sudden climate shifts, as if the earth itself decided to erase all that had gone too far, to leave behind only fragments, so no one would dare repeat it. These civilizations didn't fall to war or resource depletion. They vanished suddenly, as if wiped away. And that raises the question, who erased them from history? Nature? themselves, or something else. Perhaps today, we are standing on the same edge. Discussions about hybrids, genetically modified humans, artificial creatures. This isn't futurism. It's déjà vu. Once again, we're touching on topics for which others have already paid the price. History is cyclical, and legends. They are not mere fiction. They are signals. Warnings encrypted as myths. The Minotaur is not just a monster in stone corridors. He is a mirror. He looks at us from the depths of time and asks, "Do you really think you'll be the first to maintain control?" Because maybe those who created him already asked that question, and they no longer answer.